In times of universal deceit, truth is the only rebellion left. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Everett Piper, and this is The Rebellion. Today's show is titled, MAGA Doesn't Need More Rhinos Like Attorney General Gentner Drummond, who also is running to be governor of the state of Oklahoma. MAGA doesn't need any more of these fake Republicans. These people that are really liberal progressives, but they dress themselves up in Republican clothing so that they can get your vote. And then they lobby against you, they vote against you, and they legislate against your personal freedoms and your religious freedom in particular. That's what's taking place right now with Gentner Drummond, the Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma, who is arguably the lead contender for the Republican nomination to become governor of the reddest of red states. So I ask this question before we get into today's show. Why in the world would a red state like Oklahoma, who hasn't had one county, Oklahoma has not had one county vote blue in the last 5 successive presidential election seasons. Not one county. The entire state has voted red in 5 successive presidential elections. Stop and think about that. There isn't a state in the union that on paper is more conservative, more Republican, more red, more MAGA than Oklahoma. But yet our Attorney General, who says he's a Republican, is now suing to stop the parents of Oklahoma from having the religious freedom to choose a charter school that happens to be Catholic. Now, this is against the Constitution. The Supreme Court has already ruled on this issue some time ago when they said that you cannot deny services to any organization simply because of its religion. If there's a general service that is provided to the general public by the government, that government cannot eliminate vendors of that service just because of their religious leanings or their religious doctrine. In other words, you can't tell Jews that they can't provide education to a local community if the government is supporting all other types of education in that local community. You can't just take the Jewish organization off the table simply because it's Jewish. You can't take the Lutheran organization out of the equation just because it's Lutheran. You can't do that to Baptists. You can't do that to the Assembly of God Church. You can't do that to Methodists or Wesleyan or Nazarenes, and you can't do it to Catholics. What's happening right now is Gentner Drummond is telling you, the parents of Oklahoma, that you do not have the right to choose. You choose what school you want your kids to go to. It's your tax dollars, and he's not allowing you to use your tax dollars to pay for a charter school that just happens to be Catholic. Oh, you can use them at charter schools that he and the progressives approve of, but you can't use your tax dollars for an education that you think, as a parent, will do your kid more good. This is deplorable. This is not MAGA. This is not Republican. This is not conservative. This is not classical constitutionalism. And this is before the Supreme Court right now. They just heard this case last week, and they will decide whether to agree with Gentner Drummond, the Attorney General of Oklahoma, who is running to be the Republican nominee for the governor of Oklahoma, or they will side with St. Isidore, which is a charter school and is being represented by the Alliance Defending Freedom. Now, before we get into the show and I explain my position on this, which I obviously disagree with Gentner Drummond, and I think it's high time that Republicans recognize that we need to stop supporting people that are Republican in name only. They're essentially lying to us. They're pretending that they're all pro-Trump and they're pro-MAGA and they're pro-constitutional liberty and constitutional freedoms, freedom, religious liberty. They're pretending that they're for all of these things, but yet they're really not. They're lying to you, and they're actually legislating, and they're making governmental decisions based on a progressive worldview rather than a conservative constitutional worldview. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that after we recognize our sponsor. As you know, our sponsor is equippingthepersecuted.org. Pull that up on your on your laptop or your iPhone right now. Pull up that website, Equipping the Persecuted. I'll say that one more time, equippingthepersecuted.org. Equipping the Persecuted is an organization, it's a ministry that serves the persecuted church in Nigeria. It's a tax-deductible 501c3 organization, so everything you give, you can deduct on your taxes, unless progressives like Gentner, Drummond, or others make it illegal for you to do so. And again, one more reason for you to attend to today's show, because that's the kind of thing that these guys are trying to do. They're trying to limit your religious freedoms, and they're trying to stop you from supporting organizations like Equipping the Persecuted or St. Isidore's Catholic School. Now, Equipping the Persecuted, its unique ministry is to reach out and support our brothers and sisters in Christ in Nigeria who are being persecuted, killed, martyred for their faith. They give services to widows who have lost their husbands, who have been killed for preaching the gospel. They provide schools for orphans. They provide supplies, medical and otherwise. But they also go into these communities and they provide security training and teach these villagers, these people that live in these endangered places, how to have better security and how to hopefully stop the persecution before it actually happens. This is a great organization. They deserve your support. And they're promising, they're telling you that they want to use at least 80% of your gift for actual services to the people that are suffering, rather than using most of your money to support their administrative overhead and their salaries. You need to know this. Many nonprofits do the exact opposite. As much as 80% or more of your gift goes to pay their salaries, their overhead, and whatever else they need to have their office and whatever they're doing that might be a pretty glamorous lifestyle. Equipping the Persecuted doesn't do that. They don't have a lot of wasted expense on office complexes, and they certainly don't waste any money on administrative overhead in terms of salaries and whatnot. And because they don't do that, they can give at least 80% of your dollar goes to actually serve the people that are suffering, rather than go into the pocket of the administrators that are running the ministry. So support equippingthepersecuted.org. If you want to stand by your brothers and sisters in Christ who are suffering because they're being bold and unapologetic, they're being steadfast and immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. If you want to support people that are doing that and they're suffering as the result of doing that, then give your money, give your gift, tax deductible, to equippingthepersecuted.org. So back to today's show. MAGA does not need more rhinos like Attorney General Gentner Drummond, who is now suing to deny Oklahoma parents the right to have school choice. Why? Just because one of the charter schools applying for licensure happens to be Catholic. Now, the board that approves these things has already approved this school for being one of the options that parents should be able to choose. Again, this is a school choice issue. This is the parents deciding that that's the school they want to send their kid to. Nobody's forcing anybody to be indoctrinated in Catholic doctrine. As a Protestant, I could choose this, even though I don't agree with some of the theological distinctions of St. Isidore. I could choose it for my kid because it's the only option, the best option. It's a better option for him getting a good education than otherwise in my community. Why would any conservative Republican, somebody that's serving the personal freedoms and liberties of his constituents, why would he try to deny you that choice? And that's what Gentner Drummond is doing. Let me go over it very briefly with you here so that you can get your mind around this. I mean, we've got these guys that say they're Republican, like the governor of North Dakota. Just last week, he vetoed a bill that would have kept pornographic material out of school libraries and out of school classrooms in North Dakota. He's a Republican. And he vetoed a bill that the legislatures of North Dakota passed. He vetoed a bill. I'll say that again. He vetoed a bill that was very simple. It would stop all of this LGBTQIA rainbow alphabet soup immorality from being made available to your 13, 14, 15-year-old kids in the public school. That's all it was. That all of this garbage should not be available in libraries or in classrooms. Teach the kids how to read and write and count. Teach them how to a little bit of positive stuff on American civics, American being exceptionally good rather than terrible, evil, and exceptionally bad. We should be teaching those things and get this garbage, this sexual indoctrination and propaganda out of the reach of our children. Well, the Republican legislature in North Dakota approved of this, got the bill before the governor, and he vetoed it. And he's a Republican. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but essentially, it's not all that different than what is happening here in Oklahoma. You've got a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican governor, Kevin Stitt, who's a good governor, by the way, but he's terming out. He can't run for reelection. We've got a Republican attorney general, and he, rather than supporting the Republican agenda, the MAGA agenda, your individual liberties, personal rights, school choice, parents' rights, etc., he is suing to stop you from availing yourself of those educational rights for your children, and he's taken it all the way to the Supreme Court. Let me go over it specifically here. This past week, the Supreme Court of the United States heard the case of St. Isidore versus Drummond, whereby Oklahoma's Attorney General, like I've said, Gentner Drummond, is suing to deny Oklahoma parents the right to choose to send their children to a board-approved charter school that presently boasts a 100% graduation rate with a 98% matriculation rate to college. So this St. Isidore's graduates 100% of its students, and 98% of its graduating seniors matriculate into college. That's just one measure of success that this school has over and above the public schools. So we could spend a lot of time talking about their academic performance, why it's a better option. They serve the underprivileged and the poor. The disproportionate percentage of the students that are enrolling in St. Isidore's are the poor. They're basically, because of Gentner Drummond and people like him, parents that live in these poor communities have to send their kids to our crappy Oklahoma public schools, where we don't even have 50% of our students reading at grade level or doing math at grade level. And we're forcing people to send their kids to those terrible schools rather than give the parents an option to do better, to send their children to a better school, one like St. Isidore's. So in a state where traditional public schools are ranked among some of the worst in the nation, and I'm sorry, I'm from Oklahoma, I'm an educator, but we've got to face the facts. Our schools in Oklahoma are ranked among the worst in the nation. Why in the world would Mr. Drummond, a man who pretends to be a conservative MAGA Republican, want to deny his constituents the right to send their children to this school? Well, in a nutshell, he says, here's what Gentner Drummond says. He says he believes that this violates, here it comes, you know what's coming, it violates the wall of separation between church and state. That's why this conservative Republican, Gentner Drummond, says he's doing this. He believes in preserving the Constitution, and that this particular school, giving parents the option to choose this school. Nobody's forcing them to send their kids anywhere. It's the parents' choice and desire that their kid get educated in a better school, and the better school, by virtue of the parents' decision and the parents' choice, is St. Isidore's. Nope, says Gentner Drummond, you're too stupid to choose which school is best for your kid. And we're not going to allow you to choose a school that's Catholic. That's what Gentner Drummond is saying. That's unconstitutional. That violates the wall that separates church and state. Now, at the risk of coming across as a bit pedantic, after all, Mr. Drummond does have a law degree, and he should know all of this and everything I have said and everything I'm going to say. He should know it all. And frankly, my guess is he does, but he doesn't care. But at the risk of being just a little bit pedantic, I'm going to offer a little refresher course here in this episode on what this wall of separation actually is. What is the wall of separation that Mr. Drummond is referring to? Because that's his premise, that's his basis for telling you and me and every other parent in the state of Oklahoma that we are prohibited legally, constitutionally, from availing ourselves of St. Isidore's services if we want to use it as a charter school. Okay. Now, Drummond would say, well, no, I'm not stopping you from doing it. If you want to use your own money and pay tuition to send your kid to a parochial school, have at it. But here's the thing. We have a charter school system in Oklahoma. Charter schools are approved by a board. St. Isidore's has been approved by that board. And the previous Attorney General, John O'Connor, said everything's cool, everything's constitutional, everything's legal. But no, we get Gentner Drummond in office, and he says, nope. And oh, by the way, I want to remind you, Gentner Drummond gave $1,000 to Joe Biden in 2020 to defeat Donald Trump. Gentner Drummond gave $1,000. Oh, but he says that his wife is the one who actually made the contribution, okay? And she did it with a credit card and later retracted it for whatever reasons. Now, I want to just stop right here. What kind of man is this? What kind of person is this? What man throws his wife under the bus when he's caught making a political contribution to the most liberal Democrat candidate that we've had in a long time, Joe Biden, to defeat Donald Trump? What kind of man throws his wife under the bus politically when he gets caught? That's what Gentner Drummond did. And no, this is not fabrication. This is not just political spin. Go Google it. He got caught. They made $1,000 contribution. And when caught doing so, he blames his wife. Okay. He's also made political contributions against conservatives like Tom Coburn, Senator Coburn. Gentner Drummond, made political contributions to his opponent to try to defeat Tom Coburn. Again, it's a fact. His contributions are public record. He also made a political contribution to Congressman Jim Bridenstine's opponent. Again, Congressman Bridenstine, an unapologetic conservative. He served on as Donald Trump's director of NASA. Senator Bridenstine had to compete against Gentner Drummond's candidate because Drummond was funding the opposition to Bridenstine. Drummond was funding the opposition to Coburn, and Drummond was funding the opposition to President Trump by making political contributions, as I've just described. You can give money to whoever you want to give money to, but don't turn around and pretend that you're for a conservative agenda when your contributions demonstrate the other. Or demonstrate the opposite. And honestly, if you're going to throw your wife under the bus when you get caught doing so, I just have to raise my eyebrows. Okay, what in the world kind of person does this? All right, that aside, a refresher course, as I said, on the wall of separation of church and state. We hear this a lot. We hear it from the progressives. And because it's a progressive stump speech, and now we're hearing it from a progressive attorney general who's trying to pretend to be conservative, we need to remind him that we know what the separation of church and state is really all about. So in 1791, this is where it starts. James Madison was responsible for actually writing the First Amendment. I don't know if you knew that or not, or if you remembered that. James Madison authored the First Amendment. Okay. And basically it says this, okay, I'm going to repeat it to you. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Do you hear that second part of it? Congress, we're talking about Congress here. We're not talking about state governments. We're not talking about anything but Congress, because that's what the First Amendment says. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free expression thereof, or prohibiting the free expression thereof. So here's what it boils down to. In writing these words, Madison's argument was very simple. Congress has no authority over a citizen's religious beliefs, and no governing body has any say about how anyone expresses their faith or exercises their faith. In other words, Congress and the courts should leave the church alone and never presume to tell us what to believe, how to practice our religion, or how we can or cannot pass our faith on to our children. That's what the First Amendment says. I'm going to read this one more time to you. I've written this very specifically. I've actually given a speech on behalf of the Trump administration in Washington, D.C., when in Trump's first term, his team actually established the first division of religious freedom within HHS and OCR, ever in the history of the nation. And I was asked to come and speak at that event. So apparently the Trump administration, the OCR and HHS director at the time, felt I knew what I was talking about enough to have me come and speak on these issues. Or maybe Drummond wants to challenge me and say I'm nuts, I don't know what I'm talking about. The Alliance Defending Freedom agrees with me. The Beckett Fund agrees with me. The Liberty Institute agrees with me. And the Trump administration asked me to come and speak in Washington, D.C. at their inaugural ceremonies for their Division of Religious Freedom, for the Office of Civil Rights and Health and Human Services. I'm going to read the statement again. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free expression thereof. In writing these words, James Madison's argument was simple. Congress has no authority over a citizen's religious beliefs, and no governing body has any say about how anyone expresses or exercises their faith. In other words, Congress and the courts should leave the church alone and never presume to tell anyone what to believe, how to practice their religion, or how they can or cannot pass their faith on to their children. It's none of Congress's business. It's not anyone's business. It's not the government's business to be telling you how to educate your children when it comes to faith. They don't have any right to tell you you can't send your kid to a charter school. Okay? And they don't have the right to tell you that your tax dollars, simply because the money being used to support that charter school is being used out of the tax coffers. Where did the tax coffers come from? You. It's your money. It's your money. It is not Gentner Drummond's money. It is not Congress's money. These are tax dollars that you pay, and you should be able to choose what kind of school you want to send your kid to with those tax dollars. Again, the Supreme Court has already ruled that if it's a public service provided, that you can't eliminate organizations from being providers of that service just because you have a bias against their religion. They've already ruled on this. Gentner Drummond says he disagrees. He thinks that's a violation of the wall of separation of church and state. Well, like I said, it was 1791 when James Madison wrote the First Amendment. Well, if you fast forward 11 years till 1802, now we have a newly elected president in the United States. It's the third president of the United States. His name is Thomas Jefferson. And you know how the story goes. At least you should if you've listened to me on this show. Jefferson wrote a letter to reassure a small group of Christians in Danbury, Connecticut, that the government, under his watch as third president of the United States, that the government was obligated to stay out of their business. This is why Jefferson is writing to these Baptists in Danbury, Connecticut. He's saying the government is obligated to stay out of your business. This is his language. I contemplate with utmost reverence that the legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. He's quoting the First Amendment. And then he goes on and he says, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. That's where the language comes from. It's in this letter to the Danbury Baptists. It's not in the Constitution. It's not in the Declaration of Independence. It's not in any of our seminal documents. It's in a letter between the newly elected president of the United States and some concerned Baptists in Danbury, Connecticut, who are worried about the government getting too big for its britches and intruding into the business of the church, like took place under the king in England. And Jefferson is saying, don't worry about it. We've got the First Amendment. The First Amendment tells the government to stay out of your business. It tells the government that it's your business to exercise and express your faith. It's not ours to tell you how to do it. Okay? We have a wall of separation between the church and state, to use Jefferson's language. And the point of his analogy is really, 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 really clear. It's unmistakable if you stop and think about it. There is a wall protecting the church from the state, and no elected official or government bureaucrat should ever presume to breach that barrier. That's what Jefferson is saying. There is a wall. He's saying we've got this metaphorical wall. And the wall is there to protect the church, from the state, the church from the government, not the other way around. Now, let me double down on this. Stop and think about it. Notice that Jefferson's wall is not a prison, but a fortress. Okay? Now, why do I say that? The wall is there to protect people of faith, not to confine them. A prison confines you against your will. A fortress protects you from danger, from an enemy. And the wall that Jefferson is describing to these Baptists in Danbury, Connecticut, is a wall of protection. It's not a wall of a prison. It's there to protect people of faith, not confine them. So America's third president, Thomas Jefferson, no more thought this fence, to use a different analogy, this fence was built to restrain the church than he believed that the fence around his own home was built to restrain him. So the wall, the fence, is not intended to restrain the church any more than the wall around your backyard or the fence around your home is there to restrain you. Jefferson knew that. He was telling those who were worried about government overreach into matters of religion that in America, there is a legal barrier protecting the church from the state, and that it is built for the believer's benefit, not the government's. Okay? There's a huge difference here. The wall is for your benefit, not the government's. It's to protect you from the government, not the government from you. It's to protect the church from being told by the government what it can and cannot do. And the church is what? Not a building, not a denomination. The church is people. It's citizens who've expressed their faith. And Jefferson is saying the government can't tell you what to do with your kids or with your money or with your schools. The government can't do that because the First Amendment stops it. It's a wall. It's a barrier that says, government, here you can go, but no further. Now, the bottom line is this. The wall of separation that progressive rhinos like Gentner Drummond seem to so dearly love, especially when they want to use it as a cudgel to gain more power over the people that they pretend to serve. I mean, they're all about the separation of church and state because they can use it to bludgeon you into submission and tell you, no, you cannot do that. The government says, no, you cannot send your kids to a charter school using charter school money, your own money, tax dollars that have funded those charter schools. You can't do that if they're religious, especially if they're Catholic. Talk about anti-Catholic. Okay? So, they love this separation of church and state stuff. These progressives, these rhinos, Gentner Drummond, governor of North Dakota, and everybody in between. They love this stuff when they can use it as a cudgel to gain more power over you, the people that they're supposed to be serving. Even though the separation wasn't intended to be hostile to religion in the first place. Jefferson made this explicitly clear when he said, no nation. Now, I want you to listen to this. Context is always king. Because I'm sure Gentner Drummond and his supporters will say, well, Piper doesn't understand. Well, let's go to the context of everything Jefferson was saying at the time and what other leaders of the nation and the country at the time were saying and have said since. Let's go and look at the context. Jefferson made the context explicitly clear when he said this: no nation has ever existed or been governed without religion, nor can be. The Christian religion is the best religion that has ever been given to man, and I, as chief magistrate, as president of the United States, am bound to give it sanction. Does it sound like Jefferson is saying Christianity has no place in government? He says, As president, he's bound to give Christianity sanction because it's the best religion that has ever been given to man, and that no nation, America included, has ever existed or been governed without it, without religion. So clearly, Jefferson doesn't believe religion should not have its place in government policy, in legislation, in our schools. Clearly, Jefferson did not think that, or he wouldn't have said what I just quoted to you. John Adams agreed. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Without religion, said Adams, this world would be something not fit to be mentioned in polite company. Close quote. So you have Jefferson saying Christianity is the best religion ever given to man and that he, as president of the United States, was bound to give it sanction. You have Adams who's saying our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. And then 100 years after this, no, things haven't changed. You have Justice David Brewer. Justice Brewer of the Supreme Court of the United States at the time of Oklahoma's statehood, I might add. The timing here is critical. These were the ideas that were prevailing at the time Oklahoma's Constitution was crafted and ratified. The Supreme Court Justice Brewer at the time of Oklahoma's statehood said the following: "We are a religious people. This is historically true. From the discovery of the continent to the present hour, there is a single voice. We find everywhere a clear recognition of the same truth, that this is a Christian nation." Close quote. Justice David Brewer of the Supreme Court of the United States at the time Oklahoma was becoming a state and its constitution was being written and ratified. You have Adams, you have Jefferson, you have Justice Brewer. Let's go on. Let's talk about the President of the United States at the time Oklahoma was becoming a state. Wouldn't you think his ideas are pertinent as the context of everything we're talking about? Wouldn't Gittner Drummond want to consider Jefferson, John Adams, Justice Brewer, and Teddy Roosevelt, who was the president? Okay? He was the president at the time of Oklahoma's fledgling constitution. Now, Roosevelt's ideas might be important to consider here. What did he say? Teddy Roosevelt said, the teachings of the Bible are so interwoven and entwined with our whole civic and social life that it would be literally impossible for us to figure to ourselves what this life would be if these teachings were removed. Does it sound to you like Teddy Roosevelt thought you should take the teachings of the Bible out of civic life, out of social life? I'm using his language. In fact, he's saying it would be impossible, literally impossible, for us to figure onto ourselves, for us to think about what life would be like if we did remove these teachings. It would be impossible. Life would go bad. It would be ugly. That's Teddy Roosevelt. Now, Gittner Drummond, he's not content with being Oklahoma's attorney general. I've already pointed that out. He's now running to be governor. Why would one of America's reddest of red states, I'm repeating what I said earlier, why would one of America's reddest of red states, if not the reddest of the red states, want such a Republican in name only? A Republican in name only to be its chief executive officer. Why would we want that? My land. I'm repeating. He gave $1,000 to Joe Biden in 2020, and then he blamed his wife for making the contribution when he got caught. Like I asked earlier, what kind of man does that? What kind of man does that? The last thing MAGA needs, the last thing the Republican Party needs, the last thing conservatives need, the last thing anybody who cares about liberty, whether it's religious or not, needs is another Republican governor, air quotes, who agrees more with the worldview of Bernie Sanders and David Hogue and Gavin Newsom and AOC and Chuck Schumer than he does with Thomas Jefferson, Teddy Roosevelt, and Donald Trump. I'm Dr. Everett Piper, and this is The Rebellion.